This is Glenn Davenport. This is our fifth lesson on the study of end-time events. I haven't got started answering your questions yet. I'm still in the introduction. I recently mentioned three beliefs concerning the rapture, and that is the pre-tribulation belief, the midweek belief, and the post-tribulation belief. I'd like to start right where I left off and finish this up before we go into a different subject. When we talk about what we believe, I mentioned before, some believe in the pan doctrine, that everything will pan out. And because of that, they think that there's really no reason for them to study it any further. But I believe every person needs to study it. I believe every person needs to know. I know that everybody won't do it, but still, some of us will, and maybe we can help others to do it. From 2 Timothy chapter 2:15, Paul instructed Timothy to study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. What is there to be ashamed of? If we study and if we know where we get our answers, then we're not just reciting what somebody else says. We are students of the word. We are trying to learn. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 tells us that much study is weariness to the flesh, and most people refuse to do it. Most people are happy just to go to the preaching service and listen to a sermon. And it seems that most people don't pay that much attention. Or if they pay attention, then the preachers are not getting into the depth of it enough to teach the people, because so many just say, I believe this or I believe that. But why do you believe this? Why do you believe that? People just say, let the preachers worry about it. Well, okay, let us worry about it. But while we worry, we want to teach you what to believe. A study of the end time is time-consuming and wearisome to the flesh, but it's necessary that we as individuals study for ourselves. Otherwise, how will we know the truth? What if the preacher's not there to tell you what's happening? How will we keep from being ashamed? So study to show thyself approved to God and not ashamed. A person who has honestly studied and reached his own conclusions is not likely to be ashamed. We have some rules for interpretation. I always go by them. Who is speaking, to whom, and about what? I can ask any questions that I feel necessary, like what's the time? What's the occasion? All such questions as that. Also, another rule that I have, which is very important to me, is always make it a literal interpretation unless the text demands a spiritual application. Always be literal. Never just make a spiritual account of something that can be made literal. Jesus is the water. He's the food. He's the lamb. He's the rock. He's the door. Well, Jesus was a man. But he gave us some examples where we need to make a spiritual application. And so as we pay attention, we'll know when it's best to do that. A person who has honestly studied and has reached his own conclusion won't be ashamed. He knows the question for which he is seeking answers. He may not know where to find the answer. He may not know how long he will be searching for the answers, but he will know when he finds the answer that he's looking for. There's no substitute for study, none. May I add, it is best to do your own work rather than simply repeat what someone else has said. When Paul asked Timothy to study, I'm confident he meant study the scriptures and rightly divide the word of truth. Never ever has anybody been told to ignore the scriptures because God has everything worked out and everything under control. The fact is, the scriptures are our strength. The challenge is to learn something on your own and watch your confidence grow. That's what studying is about. Commentaries have their place, and I'm thankful for them. In fact, that's what I write, is commentaries. I want people to read it, but I'd like just to show people what my questions are and where I find the answers. It's true. Some may read the same scriptures I do and may not draw the same conclusions. Well, I don't draw the same conclusions they do, but I do feel that I have a right to my conclusions, and I feel that you have a right to your conclusions. Studying is important. Commentaries have their place, they need not come before the Scriptures. Faith in the Scriptures is what we need, much more so than faith in we have the commentaries of what the commentaries tell us. So the doctrine of the pre-tribulation rapture has proven to be confusing to many of us. It is taught as if it's an ancient doctrine that befuddled the Thessalonian church. A careful study of 2 letters of the Church of Thessalonica will show that was not the case. Paul did not believe in the imminent return of the Lord because he said, "That day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and the man of sin be revealed." So I'll deal with this statement again later and be a lot more thorough on it. But just use his own words. That day shall not come, except. So as you read it, think about those exceptions, them falling away. I don't know if anybody can rightfully describe the falling away. The following quotation is an account of the origin of the doctrine of the pre-tribulation rapture. Whether this is impeccable or not does not affect the truth of the Scriptures. Some like to say that Paul taught it. I say Paul did not teach it. If you would take the 1st and 2nd Thessalonian letters that Paul wrote, you would find that Paul spoke of the day, that day, in every chapter of 1st Thessalonians. And then in 2nd Thessalonians, he mentioned that day will not come except, and he gives us those exceptions. And then in the last chapter of 2nd Thessalonians, he'll tell you to wait patiently. Just wait patiently for the coming of the Lord. So that's where I stand on it. That day was not something that's going to just happen any moment. I want to read to you a little bit about the origin of this doctrine. And this is brief, so if you want to study more, that'll be okay. This will give you some idea where to go. This is from Wikipedia. The concept of the rapture in connection with premillennialism was expressed by the American Puritan fathers and son. Their names were Increase Mather and Cotton Mather. They held to the idea that believers would be caught up in the air, followed by judgments on the earth, and then the millennium. The term rapture was used by Philip Doddridge in 1738 and John Gill in 1748 in their New Testament commentary, with the idea that believers would be caught up prior to the judgment on the earth and Jesus' second coming. The concept of a pre-tribulation rapture was articulated by Baptist Morgan Edwards in an essay published in 1788 in Philadelphia. John Nelson Darby, considered to be the father of dispensationalism, first proposed a pre-tribulation rapture in 1827. This view was accepted among many other Plymouth brethren in England. Darby and other prominent brethren were part of the Brethren movement, which impacted American Christianity, primarily through their writings. Influences included the Bible Conference movement starting in 1878 with the Niagara Bible Conference. These conferences, which were initially inclusive of historist and futurist premillennialism, led to an increasing acceptance of futurist premillennial views and the pre-tribulation rapture, especially among Presbyterians and Baptists and congregational members. Popular books also contributed to the acceptance of the pre-tribulation rapture, including William Eugene Blackstone's book, Jesus is Coming, published in 1878, and which sold more than 1.3 million copies. Then the Schofield Reference Bible, published in 1909 and 1919, were revised in 1967. This is from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. The story of the second coming of Christ is about as ancient as anyone can imagine. Some say Job was the first book written to be part of the Scriptures. A few things he said verify the belief is not new. And so I'm going to close for today and start there in my next lesson.